E7 is an action RPG for the PSP, produced by XSEED and developed by Falcom. The E series has not been very popular outside of Japan, probably because no one knows how to pronounce it. The first Ys game was in '87, and then there have been lots of Ys games since. Mostly remakes and ports of the same Ys games over and over. The E series follows Adol Kristen. He's like part Gulliver, part Conan, part James Bond, part Lena Inverse. Every game he's in is kind of a standalone adventure. He goes to all sorts of places and goes on adventures, and he usually helps out the people there. Even though he's in all the games and he's the one you play as, he's like not even really the main character. Usually the people he's helping are like the focus of the story, and Adol acts as the means by which you explore the new world in each game. The episodic nature of the series makes jumping into it pretty easy. Adol comes to the land of Altago with his buddy Dogi, who is like the skipper to his Gilligan. And you know, stuff isn't great. There's this mysterious illness and monsters and natural disasters. So naturally, he ends up having to get to the bottom of it. He ends up being the chosen one. Adol is actually a little like Hellboy in that way. Basically, everywhere he goes, he's like the guy who is destined to solve the problems there, which is pretty interesting. He's supposed to be an adventurer and he's supposed to, be in charge of his own destiny, but everywhere he goes, it turns out he's supposed to be there. There's a potential for a lot of interesting explorations on free will and causality, but this isn't that kind of game. At first glance, Ys might seem derivative. Everyone has color-coded hair. You're asked to visit the dragons. All the dragons correspond to certain elements. You collect things that are certain colors, and once you get all the things, you could defeat the evil. The first half hour of the game is a little boring and takes a while to get into, but once you start going through the story, it's surprisingly sincere. At the start, you don't think you're going to like any of the characters, but then when you think the storyline is going to be really stereotypical, characters do really surprising things. The good characters aren't as good as they seem. The bad characters aren't as bad as they seem. The story ends up having a little more depth than it first seems like it's going to. It's kind of neat to see how the land of Altago deals with itself, the way the people get along, the little political intrigue that goes on. You could really take or leave the story, which is good because you really play Ys for the gameplay. Here's how the flow of the game works. You go out and you fight monsters. You get materials from those monsters. You use the materials to make new weapons. You learn new skills from those weapons. Use the new skills to fight more monsters, to get newer materials, to make newer weapons, to get more skills, to fight more monsters. It's a self-fulfilling loop, and it's really fun. The controls are really tight, lightning quick, feels good to play. E7 is the second game in the series to have a party system. In all the other games, you play just as Adol, but in E7, you play as Adol and all of his traveling companions. There's a lot of split-second decision-making. All different characters have different weapon types and a different set of skills and different passive abilities that bolster the party as a whole. And even though certain enemies are vulnerable to certain weapon types, you're never forced into playing a certain way. There's always a good balance between the thing that you should do and the thing that you want to do. What I also really respect in this game is that you go all over the land and collect things Zelda style, but rather than just being like the fire thing, the water thing, the wind thing, as you play through the game, you get different layers added to the gameplay for you. Like at first you get like a super duper attack, and then you get passive abilities that each party member has, which basically makes each combination of party members unique. You get the ability to teleport between save points really early in the game, which is great. The game is constantly changing a little bit as you play through it, which is really great. The boss fights are great. All the dungeons basically work as like a training ground for the boss fight at the end. And the cool thing is that they only get bigger and more ridiculous as the game goes on. The translation is really good, even when the story can be bland and predictable. There's one or two Simpsons references. Dogi is a great character and often says what the player is feeling. It's actually a really interesting concept that the main character is a silent protagonist, but his friend kind of speaks for him anyway. A lot of the other characters are basically just like walking archetypes. You end up caring more about their skill sets than who they really are. Though the brown girl with the hammer is pretty cool. E7 isn't an original game per se, it's just really well made. And if you ever thought about delving into the series, it's a great place to start. Halfway through I was like, man, if only there was multiplayer, it'd be cool as hell. Hopefully they make the next Ys multiplayer.